What if the life you've been trying so hard to hold together was never meant to stay? What if the identity you built, the version of yourself you've been protecting, the way you've been living every single day, is the very thing that's been quietly holding you back? It doesn't feel like that at first. It feels like everything is falling apart, like you're losing control, like the ground beneath you is no longer stable, like the person you once were is slowly disappearing. And that feeling can be terrifying, because when you've spent so much time becoming someone, holding everything together, trying to make it all work, the idea of losing it feels like losing yourself. But what if you're not losing yourself at all? What if, for the first time in your life, you're actually starting to see clearly? The Buddha taught that suffering often begins the moment we cling to what is not meant to last, and freedom begins the moment we learn to let go. So what if this discomfort, this confusion, this quiet collapse you're experiencing is not here to break you, but to release you? What if this is not your ending, but the beginning of your return? 1. Growth begins where your old identity ends. There is a quiet moment that comes into every life, a moment that does not arrive with noise or sudden change, but with a subtle shift that you can feel deep within yourself. It is the moment when something inside you begins to feel heavy, not in a way that is overwhelming, but in a way that is persistent, like a gentle weight that you can no longer ignore. You may not understand it immediately, and you may even try to distract yourself from it, but it stays with you. It shows up in your thoughts, in your reactions, and in the way you experience the world around you. Slowly, you begin to realize that the way you have been living, the way you have been thinking, and even the way you have been seeing yourself no longer feels true. It feels as though you are carrying a version of yourself that no longer fits, like wearing something that once felt comfortable but now feels restrictive. And this realization can be unsettling, because for so long, this version of you has been your identity. It has been the way you understood yourself, the way you presented yourself to the world, and the way you navigated your experiences. Letting go of it can feel like losing a part of yourself, and that fear can make you want to hold on even tighter. But what you are feeling is not a loss. It is a transition. It is the quiet beginning of change that does not ask for force, but for awareness. The truth is, the person you have been was never meant to remain forever. Life does not move in stillness. It moves in cycles, in endings and beginnings, in constant transformation. Just as the seasons shift without asking for permission, just as the sun rises and sets without resistance, every version of you has its own time. And when that time passes, holding on does not preserve it. It only creates resistance within you. Yet, this is what most people do. They hold on to old identities, old beliefs, and old patterns, not because they are still true, but because they are familiar. And familiarity can feel like safety, even when it quietly limits your growth. You may find yourself repeating the same thoughts, the same reactions, and the same emotional patterns, even when a part of you knows that they no longer serve you. You may try to improve small aspects of yourself, to fix certain behaviors, or to control certain outcomes, hoping that it will bring clarity. But no matter how much you adjust the surface, something deeper continues to feel misaligned. That quiet feeling, that inner discomfort, is not something to fear. It is something to listen to. It is the part of you that is beginning to wake up, the part of you that can see that you are no longer who you used to be. And before something new can emerge, something old must gently come to an end. Not in a harsh or forceful way, but in a natural and effortless way, like leaves falling from a tree when their time has passed. The tree does not struggle to keep them. It does not question the process. It simply allows the change to happen, trusting that what falls away is making space for what is to come. In the same way, you are not losing yourself. You are shedding what was never truly you to begin with. You are releasing the layers that were built from past experiences, from fears, from expectations, and from moments that shaped you but were never meant to define you forever. And yes, this process can feel uncertain. There may be moments where you feel like you are standing between two versions of yourself, no longer connected to who you once were, but not yet fully grounded in who you are becoming. That space can feel unfamiliar and sometimes even uncomfortable, but it is not a space of emptiness. It is a space of transformation. It is where clarity begins to form, where awareness deepens, and where your true self slowly starts to reveal itself. This is not something that needs to be rushed. In fact, the more you try to force it, the more resistance you may feel. Transformation does not happen through pressure. It happens through allowing. It happens when you stop trying to hold on to what is fading and instead begin to trust what is unfolding. So, if you feel like parts of you are changing, if certain thoughts, habits, or identities no longer feel aligned, do not panic. Do not rush to replace them or fill that space with something new. Instead, give yourself permission to simply be in that moment. Observe what is leaving without judgment. Allow yourself to feel the shift without trying to control it, because this is not the end of who you are. It is the beginning of something more honest, more peaceful, and more real. Your old self is not being destroyed. It is simply stepping aside. It is making space for something deeper within you to emerge, something that has always been there, quietly waiting beneath the surface. And as you begin to let go, as you begin to trust this process, you will start to notice that what is rising within you feels lighter, clearer, and more aligned. This is how transformation truly begins, not by becoming someone new, but by allowing what is no longer true to gently fall away. And in that quiet release, your true self does not need to be forced or created. It simply begins to appear, slowly, naturally, and with a sense of peace that feels like coming home to yourself. 2. Your pain is not against you. It is guiding you toward awakening. There are moments in life when pain enters quietly, without warning, and settles deep within you. It does not always arrive as something dramatic or visible to others. Sometimes it is a silent heaviness, a feeling you carry in your chest, a weight in your thoughts that follows you even in your calmest moments. You may try to ignore it, distract yourself from it, or convince yourself that it will pass on its own. But no matter how far you try to move away from it, it has a way of staying with you, waiting patiently to be seen. And when pain stays, the mind often begins to resist it. You may start asking why this is happening to you, why life feels difficult, or why things did not turn out the way you hoped. It can feel unfair, confusing, and sometimes even overwhelming. In those moments, it is natural to see pain as something negative, something that has come to disturb your peace. You may begin to believe that pain is your enemy, something you need to escape from as quickly as possible. But what if pain is not here to harm you? What if it is not working against you, but trying to guide you towards something deeper? The truth is, pain often arrives when something within you is no longer aligned. It appears when you have been holding on for too long, when you have been ignoring what your inner voice has been trying to tell you. It shows up when you are living in a way that is not true to your nature, when you are attached to things that were never meant to stay, or when you are carrying emotional weight that was never yours to hold forever. Pain is not random. It has a purpose, even if that purpose is not immediately clear. It is a signal, a quiet message that something within you needs attention. It is asking you to pause, to look within, and to become aware of what you have been avoiding. Most people, however, do the opposite. Instead of turning toward their pain, they run from it. They distract themselves with noise, with constant activity, with temporary pleasures that create a momentary sense of relief. And while these distractions may work for a short time, they do not resolve the pain. they only delay it. Because pain that is not understood does not disappear. It waits. But the moment you stop running, the moment you allow yourself to sit with your pain without trying to escape it, something begins to change. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. You may feel vulnerable, exposed to emotions you have been trying to avoid. But if you stay present, if you observe it with patience instead of resistance, you begin to see that pain is not as overwhelming as it once seemed. You begin to understand it. You begin to notice that your pain is connected to your attachments, to your expectations, and to the stories you have been telling yourself about how life should be. You see how certain experiences shaped your beliefs, how certain moments created fear, and how those fears influence the way you see yourself and the world. And in that understanding, something powerful happens. Your pain starts to lose its intensity, not because it disappears instantly, but because you are no longer fighting it. You are no longer resisting what is already there. Instead, you are allowing it to teach you. You are allowing it to reveal the parts of you that are ready to heal, the parts of you that are ready to be released. This is where awakening begins. It does not begin in comfort. It does not begin when everything is perfect. It begins in the moments where you are forced to see clearly, where you can no longer pretend that everything is fine. Pain has a way of breaking illusions. It removes the false sense of control, the false identities, and the attachments that kept you stuck. It shows you what is real, and while this process can feel difficult, it is also deeply transformative, because once you see clearly, you cannot unsee. Once you understand the source of your suffering, you begin to loosen your attachment to it. You begin to realize that you are not your pain. You are the awareness that is observing it. This realization creates space. Space between you and your emotions, space between you and your thoughts, space where healing can begin naturally. You no longer feel consumed by what you feel. Instead, you start to witness it, to understand it, and to let it pass without holding on. So the next time pain enters your life, instead of asking why it is happening to you, gently ask yourself what it is trying to show you. Instead of resisting it, allow yourself to sit with it, even if only for a few moments. Listen to it, not with fear, but with curiosity, because your pain is not here to destroy you. It is here to wake you up. It is here to guide you back to yourself, to help you see what is no longer true, and to gently lead you toward a deeper understanding of who you are beyond your struggles. And when you begin to see pain in this way, something shifts within you. It no longer feels like an enemy you need to fight. It becomes a teacher, a guide that is quietly leading you toward clarity, toward growth, and ultimately, toward peace. Attachment is the root of your suffering. There is a subtle habit within the human mind, one that often goes unnoticed, yet quietly shapes the way you experience your entire life. It is the tendency to hold on, to cling to people, to moments, to expectations, and to the idea that things should remain the way you want them to be. At first, this holding on feels natural. It feels like care, like love, like importance. You believe that by holding on tightly, you are protecting what matters to you. But over time, something begins to shift. What once felt like comfort slowly begins to feel like tension. What once felt like love begins to feel like fear. And without realizing it, you start to suffer not because of what is happening, but because of your resistance to letting it change. Attachment does not always appear in obvious ways. It can be quiet, hidden beneath your thoughts and expectations. It can show up as the need for things to go a certain way, the need for people to behave in a certain manner, or the need for life to follow a path you have imagined. And when reality does not match those expectations, discomfort begins to arise. You may feel disappointed when things do not work out the way you hoped. You may feel anxious when something you value feels uncertain. You may feel pain when something you were holding on to begins to fade. And in those moments, it can feel as though life itself is the source of your suffering. But if you look closely, you may begin to see something deeper. It is not the change that causes the pain. It is the resistance to that change. Life, by its very nature, is always moving. Nothing remains the same. People change, situations shift, and moments pass whether you are ready or not. This is not something that happens to you. It is simply the nature of existence. And yet, the mind often struggles to accept this. It tries to hold on to what feels good, to preserve what is familiar, and to avoid what feels uncertain. This is where suffering begins. Because when you try to hold on to something that is meant to change, you create tension within yourself. You create a silent conflict between what is and what you wish it to be. And that conflict becomes the source of your discomfort. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, not because attachment itself is wrong, but because it is based on the illusion that things can remain permanent. It is the belief that you can control what is naturally uncontrollable, that you can hold on to something that is meant to pass. But the more you try to hold on, the more fragile everything begins to feel. You may start to fear losing what you have. You may become anxious about the future, constantly trying to predict or control outcomes. You may even begin to lose your sense of peace, not because anything has gone wrong, but because you are trying to make things stay the same. And this is where awareness becomes important. The moment you begin to observe your attachments, you start to see how they influence your emotions. You begin to notice how your mind reacts when something does not go your way, how it creates stories, expectations, and fears. And in that observation, you create a small but powerful distance between yourself and your reactions. This distance is where freedom begins. Because once you see that your suffering is coming from attachment, you also begin to realize that you have the ability to loosen that grip. Not by forcing yourself to stop caring, and not by pushing things away, but by gently allowing things to be as they are. Letting go of attachment does not mean you stop loving, and it does not mean you stop valuing what matters to you. It simply means you stop trying to control it. It means you allow people to be who they are. You allow situations to unfold naturally, and you allow life to move without constant resistance. There is a quiet peace that comes with this understanding. When you are no longer holding on so tightly, you begin to feel lighter. You begin to experience moments without the pressure of needing them to last forever. You begin to appreciate what is present without fearing its end. And slowly, your relationship with life begins to change. You are no longer trying to control every outcome. You are no longer consumed by fear of loss. Instead, you move with life rather than against it. You allow things to come and go, knowing that your peace does not depend on their permanence. This is not something that happens instantly. It is a gradual shift, a quiet practice of awareness and acceptance. There will be moments where you find yourself holding on again, where fear returns, where expectations arise. But each time you notice it, each time you gently let go, you take another step toward freedom. Because in the end, it is not life that creates your suffering. It is the way you hold on to it. And the moment you begin to loosen that grip, even slightly, you begin to experience something different. A sense of calm, a sense of openness, and a quiet understanding that peace is not found in controlling life, but in allowing it to flow as it is. 4. What feels like breaking is actually the beginning of your rebuilding. There are moments in life when everything begins to feel like it is falling apart. Moments where the structure you once relied on no longer feels stable, where your thoughts feel scattered, your emotions feel overwhelming, and your sense of direction becomes unclear. In these moments, it can feel as though something inside you is breaking, as if the version of yourself you once depended on is no longer able to hold everything together. This experience can be deeply unsettling. You may feel lost, unsure of who you are or where you are going. Things that once made sense may no longer feel meaningful. The habits, routines, and beliefs that once gave you a sense of control may begin to fade, leaving behind a space that feels unfamiliar and uncertain. And in that space, it is easy to believe that something has gone wrong, that you are somehow falling behind, or that you are losing yourself. But what if this feeling of breaking is not a sign of failure? What if it is the beginning of something necessary? The truth is, what feels like breaking is often the process of something false beginning to fall away. It is the moment when the structures you built around yourself, the identities you carried, and the beliefs you held onto can no longer support the truth that is trying to emerge within you. It is not that you are becoming weaker, it is that the parts of you that were never truly aligned are starting to dissolve. And this process is not always gentle. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like emotional exhaustion. Sometimes it feels like you are standing in the middle of your life without a clear sense of direction. But even in that uncertainty, something important is happening beneath the surface. You are being prepared. Because before something real can be built, what is unstable must first come down. If you were to continue building on a foundation that is no longer strong, the weight of it would eventually collapse. In the same way, life begins to remove what cannot support your growth, even if it feels uncomfortable in the moment. This is why breakdowns often come before breakthroughs. Not because life is working against you, but because it is trying to realign you with something deeper. It is creating space where there was once resistance. It is clearing away what no longer belongs, so that something more authentic can take its place. But in the middle of this process, it is easy to misunderstand what is happening. You may begin to question yourself. You may wonder why you feel the way you do, why things are changing, or why you can no longer find comfort in what once felt familiar. You may even try to hold on to what is leaving, trying to rebuild the same patterns, the same identity, the same sense of control. And yet, no matter how much you try, it does not feel the same. That is because you are not meant to go back. You are being invited to move forward, not by forcing a new version of yourself, but by allowing the old one to gently release. This is not about becoming something artificial or pretending to be strong. It is about allowing what is real to take shape, even if it happens slowly. There is a quiet strength in this process. It is not the strength of control or resistance, but the strength of allowing. The strength to sit with uncertainty without rushing to escape it. The strength to trust that even when things feel unclear, there is a deeper process unfolding, and as you begin to allow this, something begins to shift. The confusion starts to settle. The emotional weight begins to feel lighter. You may not have all the answers, but you begin to feel a sense of calm returning, a sense of clarity that does not come from external validation, but from within. You start to understand that you were never truly breaking. You were opening. You were shedding the layers that no longer fit, releasing the expectations, the fears, and the identities that were built from past experiences. And as those layers fall away, what remains is something more grounded, more honest, and more aligned with who you truly are. Rebuilding does not happen in a single moment. It happens gradually, in small shifts of awareness, in quiet realizations, and in the way you begin to see yourself and your life differently. It happens when you stop trying to fix everything at once and instead allow things to come together naturally. So if you find yourself in a moment where everything feels uncertain, where it feels like parts of your life or your identity are falling apart, take a deep breath and remind yourself that this is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of your rebuilding. Not a rebuilding based on fear or control, but a rebuilding rooted in truth. A rebuilding that is not rushed, not forced, but allowed to unfold in its own time. And as you move through this process, slowly and patiently, you will begin to see that what once felt like breaking was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to free you. 5. Stop searching outside. Everything begins within. There comes a point in life where you begin to feel tired, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. It is a quiet kind of exhaustion that builds over time, the kind that comes from constantly searching, constantly reaching, constantly believing that something outside of you will finally bring you peace. You look for answers in people, in achievements, in validation, and in the hope that one day something will arrive that makes everything feel complete. At first, this search feels natural. You are taught to believe that happiness is something to be found, something to be earned, something that exists somewhere beyond where you are right now. So you keep moving forward, thinking that the next moment, the next opportunity, or the next person will give you what you have been missing. But no matter how much you search, there is always a part of you that feels unsatisfied. Even when you achieve something, even when things seem to fall into place, the feeling does not last. It fades, and you find yourself searching again, looking for the next thing that might finally bring a sense of peace. And over time, this creates a quiet realization that what you are searching for cannot be found outside of you, because everything outside of you is temporary. Situations change, people come and go, and circumstances shift in ways you cannot control. If your peace depends on these things, then your peace will always feel uncertain. It will always feel like something you have to chase and hold on to. This is where many people become stuck. They continue searching, believing that they just have not found the right thing yet. They think that if they try a little harder, achieve a little more, or find the right person, everything will finally feel complete. But the truth is, the more you rely on the outside world to define your inner state, the further you move away from yourself. Because peace is not something that can be given to you. It is something that already exists within you. It has always been there, quietly present beneath the noise of your thoughts, beneath your fears, beneath your constant need to control and understand everything. But when your attention is always directed outward, you lose connection with that inner space. You begin to forget that everything you are searching for is not something you need to acquire. It is something you need to return to. This does not mean that the outside world has no value. It does not mean you should stop caring about your goals, your relationships, or your experiences. But it does mean that you begin to see them differently. Instead of depending on them for your sense of peace, you begin to experience them without attachment, without the pressure of needing them to complete you. And this shift changes everything. Because when you stop searching outside, you begin to turn inward. You begin to observe your thoughts, your emotions, and your reactions with a deeper awareness. You begin to notice how often your mind looks for validation, how often it compares, how often it creates stories about what you need in order to feel whole. And in that awareness, something begins to soften. You start to realize that you do not need to chase every thought that arises. You do not need to follow every desire or fear. You begin to see that there is a quiet presence within you that exists beyond all of this, a part of you that is not disturbed by change, not defined by external circumstances. This is where true peace begins. Not when everything in your life is perfect, but when you begin to understand the nature of your own mind, when you begin to sit with yourself without constantly trying to escape into something else. When you allow yourself to be present, even in simple moments, without needing anything more. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. You may feel the urge to go back to your old patterns, to seek distraction, to look for something outside of you to fill the silence. But if you stay with it, if you allow yourself to sit in that stillness, you begin to discover something important. You are not incomplete. You were never missing anything. What you were searching for was never outside of you to begin with. And as this understanding deepens, Your relationship with life begins to change. You no longer feel the constant pressure to find something that will fix everything. You no longer feel the need to control every outcome or seek approval from others. Instead, you begin to trust yourself. You begin to feel a quiet sense of stability that does not depend on what is happening around you. You begin to experience life as it is, without constantly trying to turn it into something else. This does not mean that challenges will disappear. Life will still change. Difficult moments will still come. But your experience of them becomes different. You no longer feel lost within them because you are no longer disconnected from yourself. You carry your sense of peace with you rather than searching for it outside. So if you feel tired of searching, if you feel like nothing you find is truly lasting, take a moment to pause. Turn your attention inward, even if only for a few moments. Sit with yourself, without expectation, without judgment, because everything you have been looking for has been quietly waiting within you all along. Letting go isn't the end, it's where you begin. There is a quiet fear that lives within all of us, a fear that tells us if we let go, we will lose something important. It whispers that if we release what we are holding on to, whether it is a person, a memory, a version of ourselves, or a belief we have carried for so long, we will be left with emptiness. And because of this fear, we hold on tightly, even when we can feel that what we are holding no longer brings us peace. At first, holding on feels like strength. It feels like loyalty, like commitment, like control. You tell yourself that you are not the kind of person who gives up easily, that you can endure, that you can carry the weight a little longer. And so you continue, even when it becomes heavy, even when it begins to take more from you than it gives. But slowly, something inside you starts to change. You begin to feel the weight of what you are carrying, not just in your mind, but in your energy, in your emotions, in the quiet moments when you are alone with your thoughts. What once felt meaningful begins to feel exhausting. What once felt necessary begins to feel misaligned. And yet, despite this awareness, letting go still feels difficult, because letting go is often misunderstood. It is seen as giving up, as losing, as walking away from something that once mattered. It can feel like failure, like you are abandoning something that you should have been able to hold on to. And this perception makes it even harder to release what no longer belongs in your life. But the truth is, letting go is not loss. It is space. It is the quiet, necessary space that allows something new to enter, something that is more aligned with who you are becoming. When you continue to hold on to what no longer serves you, you leave no room for growth. You fill your life with weight, with attachments, with patterns that keep repeating, leaving no space for clarity or peace to emerge. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands by tightening your grip. The tighter you hold, the faster it slips away. But when you soften your hands, when you allow instead of control, what needs to stay will stay, and what needs to go will flow away naturally. This is the nature of letting go. It is not something you force, and it is not something you rush. It is something you allow. It is a quiet understanding that not everything is meant to remain in your life forever, and that holding on beyond its time only creates suffering. There may be moments when letting go feels like stepping into the unknown. You may not know what comes next, and that uncertainty can feel uncomfortable. But what you are really stepping into is not emptiness, but openness. You are creating a space where you are no longer defined by what you used to be, no longer restricted by what you used to hold on to. And in that space, something begins to shift. You start to feel lighter, not because everything in your life is perfect, but because you are no longer carrying what was never meant to stay. You begin to experience a sense of relief, a quiet calm that comes from releasing the constant tension of trying to hold everything together. This does not mean that letting go is always easy. There may still be moments where you feel the urge to go back, to hold on again, to return to what is familiar. But each time you choose to release instead of cling, you strengthen a different part of yourself, a part that is rooted in awareness rather than fear. You begin to understand that your identity is not tied to what you hold on to. You are not defined by your past, your relationships, or your experiences. These things may have shaped you, but they do not own you. And when you let go of the need to carry them forward, you begin to reconnect with a deeper sense of self. This is where your true self starts to emerge. Not as something new that you have to create, but as something that has always been there, quietly waiting beneath everything you were holding on to. It is the part of you that is calm, present, and not dependent on external circumstances to feel complete. Letting go allows that part of you to breathe. It allows you to move forward without the constant pull of the past, without the weight of expectations, without the fear of losing something that was never meant to define you. So if you feel like you are holding on to something that is becoming heavy, take a moment to gently question it. Ask yourself if it is still aligned with who you are, or if you are simply holding on because you are afraid to let go. And if you find that it is time to release it, do not see it as loss. See it as making space, space for clarity, space for peace, space for something more honest to enter your life. Because in the end, letting go is not about losing anything that is truly meant for you. It is about allowing yourself to become who you were always meant to be. 7. Rebuilding yourself is the strongest way to love who you are. There comes a moment in life when you begin to see yourself more clearly, not through the expectations of others, not through the roles you have been playing, but through a quiet, honest awareness that cannot be ignored. It is in this moment that you start to realize how much of your life has been shaped by trying to meet external standards, trying to be understood, accepted, or valued by the world around you. And slowly, you begin to feel tired, not because you are weak, but because you have been carrying a version of yourself that was built for survival, not for truth. A version shaped by fear, by past experiences, by the need to protect yourself or to belong. And while that version once served a purpose, there comes a point where it no longer feels aligned with who you truly are. This is where rebuilding begins, not as an act of force, not as a sudden transformation, but as a quiet decision to return to yourself, a decision to stop abandoning your truth in order to fit into something that no longer feels real. And this decision, though it may seem simple, is one of the most profound acts of self-love. Because true self-love is not about surface-level comfort or temporary validation. It is not about convincing yourself that everything is fine when it is not. It is about having the courage to see yourself honestly, to acknowledge what is no longer working, and to choose a different way of being. Rebuilding yourself requires you to let go of illusions. It asks you to release the identities you have outgrown, the patterns that no longer serve you, and the beliefs that were formed in moments when you did not yet understand your own worth. It asks you to stop seeking approval from outside and to begin listening to the quiet voice within you that knows what is true. And this process is not always easy. There may be moments where you question yourself, where you wonder if you are doing the right thing, where you feel uncertain about the path ahead. You may feel the pull of your old habits, the comfort of familiar patterns, even if they no longer bring you peace. But each time you choose to move forward with awareness instead of fear, you strengthen your connection with yourself. This is what self-love truly looks like. It is not loud or performative. It is quiet, steady, and deeply personal. It is the way you speak to yourself in difficult moments. It is the way you choose not to return to what once hurt you. It is the way you give yourself permission to grow, even when it feels uncomfortable. Rebuilding yourself is an act of respect. It is the recognition that your life deserves to be lived in alignment with who you truly are, not who you were conditioned to be. It is the understanding that you are allowed to change, allowed to evolve, and allowed to release anything that no longer reflects your truth. And as you begin this process, something within you starts to shift. You begin to trust yourself more, not because you have all the answers, but because you are no longer ignoring your inner voice. You are no longer moving through life based on fear or external validation. Instead, you are learning to listen, to observe, and to respond from a place of awareness. This creates a quiet sense of stability, a feeling that even when life becomes uncertain, you are still grounded within yourself. You are no longer easily shaken by the opinions of others or by changing circumstances, because your sense of worth is no longer dependent on them. And this is where true transformation takes root, not in dramatic changes, but in the small, consistent choices you make every day. The choice to be honest with yourself. The choice to let go of what no longer aligns. The choice to move forward even when it feels unfamiliar. Each of these choices becomes a step in rebuilding your life, not into something artificial, but into something real. Something that reflects your truth. Something that feels peaceful, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. So, if you find yourself in a place where you feel the need to change, where you feel the desire to rebuild, do not rush it and do not approach it with pressure. Instead, approach it with patience, with kindness, and with understanding, because you are not fixing something that is broken. You are caring for something that has been neglected, and the more gently you approach this process, the more naturally it unfolds. Rebuilding yourself is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are finally choosing yourself. And in that choice, there is a quiet kind of love, one that does not depend on anything outside of you, one that grows stronger with time, and one that allows you to become who you were always meant to be. 8. You are not becoming someone new, you are returning to your true nature. There is a quiet misunderstanding that many people carry when they begin the journey of transformation. They believe that in order to change their life, they must become someone completely new, someone stronger, wiser, more disciplined, or more successful. They imagine that the person they are right now is not enough, and that somewhere ahead of them exists a better version they must create. And so they begin to chase this idea. They try to rebuild themselves by adding more, doing more, becoming more. They push themselves to think differently, act differently, and shape themselves into an image they believe will finally bring them peace. But even in that effort, something can feel exhausting, as if they are constantly trying to become someone they are not. Because the truth is, transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Before the expectations, before the fear, before the layers of identity were built over time, there was a version of you that existed in a very different way. A version of you that was present, open, and not burdened by constant self-judgment. A version of you that did not question your worth, did not compare yourself to others, and did not feel the need to prove anything. That version of you has not disappeared. It has simply been covered by experiences that shaped your beliefs, by moments that created fear, by patterns that developed as a way to protect yourself. Over time, these layers became so familiar that you began to mistake them for who you are. You began to identify with your thoughts, your emotions, your past, and your struggles. But these things are not your true nature. They are temporary. They come and go, changing with time, influenced by your environment and your experiences. And yet, something within you remains constant. Something within you has been present through every stage of your life, quietly observing, quietly aware. That is who you are, not the identity you built, not the roles you played, but the awareness beneath it all. And when you begin to see this, your understanding of transformation begins to shift. You no longer feel the need to force yourself into becoming something else. Instead, you begin to let go of what is not real, what is not permanent, what is not truly you. This is what returning looks like. It is not dramatic. It is not something that happens overnight. It is a gradual process of releasing, of observing, of allowing. It is the quiet act of noticing your thoughts without becoming them, of feeling your emotions without being controlled by them, of experiencing life without constantly trying to shape it into something else. At first, this may feel unfamiliar. You may still feel the pull of your old patterns, the urge to define yourself through your past, your achievements, or your struggles. But as you continue to observe, as you continue to create space between yourself and these patterns, they begin to lose their hold on you. You begin to feel lighter. Not because everything in your life has changed, but because your relationship with yourself has changed. You are no longer carrying the weight of trying to be someone else. You are no longer trapped in the belief that you need to fix yourself in order to be whole. You begin to understand that you were always whole. You were simply covered by layers that made you forget. And as those layers begin to fall away, what remains is something deeply peaceful. A sense of being that does not depend on external validation, that does not shift with every passing thought, that remains steady even when life becomes uncertain. This is your true nature. It is not something you need to create, and it is not something you need to earn. It is something you reconnect with when you stop identifying with everything that is temporary. It is something you remember when you become present, when you allow yourself to simply be without judgment. And in this remembering, there is a deep sense of relief, because you realize that you no longer have to chase an ideal version of yourself. You no longer have to carry the pressure of becoming something more. Instead, you can begin to relax into who you already are, into a state of awareness that is calm, open, and at peace. So, if you feel like you are trying to change yourself, trying to become someone different, take a moment to pause. Ask yourself if you are adding more layers, or if you are gently removing what no longer belongs, because your journey is not about becoming, it is about returning to the part of you that was never broken, never incomplete, and never in need of fixing, returning to the part of you that has always been present, quietly waiting beneath everything you thought you had to be. And the more you return, the more you begin to see that what you were searching for was never ahead of you. It was always within you, patiently waiting for you to come back. 9. True transformation begins the moment you release what no longer belongs to you. There comes a moment in your life when holding on begins to feel heavier than letting go. It is not always a dramatic moment, not always something that announces itself clearly, but a quiet realization that slowly settles within you. You begin to feel that certain things you are carrying, whether they are thoughts, emotions, relationships, or expectations, no longer feel aligned with who you are becoming. At first, you may try to ignore this feeling. You may tell yourself that you can continue as you are, that things will eventually feel right again if you just hold on a little longer. But the truth has a way of returning. It appears in your thoughts, in your emotions, and in the subtle discomfort that follows you, reminding you that something is no longer meant to stay. And this is where many people struggle, because letting go is not always easy. Even when something no longer brings you peace, it can still feel familiar. And familiarity has a way of making you feel safe, even when it is quietly holding you back. You may find yourself holding on to old identities, to past experiences, to relationships that no longer feel balanced, or to beliefs that limit your growth. Not because they are right, but because they are known. And stepping away from what is known can feel uncertain. It can feel like stepping into a space where you do not yet know who you are without these things. It can feel like losing a part of yourself, even when that part was never truly aligned with your deeper truth. But what you begin to realize slowly and gently, is that holding on does not preserve what you are afraid to lose. It only prolongs your suffering, because when something no longer belongs in your life, keeping it does not make it right again. It only creates tension within you, a quiet conflict between what is and what you wish it could still be. And this is where transformation begins, not when you force yourself to change, not when you try to become someone new, but in the moment you begin to release what is no longer true for you. It is a simple shift, but a powerful one. The moment you stop resisting the truth and start allowing it. Letting go does not always mean physically walking away. Sometimes it means releasing the emotional attachment you have been holding on to. It means allowing a memory to be just a memory, without letting it define your present. It means letting go of expectations, of the way you thought things should have been, and accepting things as they are. And this process requires awareness. It requires you to be honest with yourself, to gently observe what you are still holding on to, and to ask yourself if it is still serving your growth, or if it is simply familiar. This is not something you need to rush. It is something you begin to notice, moment by moment, thought by thought. And as you begin to release, something begins to shift. The weight you have been carrying starts to feel lighter. The tension in your mind begins to soften. You start to feel a sense of openness, a quiet space within you that was once filled with resistance. And in that space, clarity begins to emerge. You begin to see things more clearly, not through the lens of attachment, but through awareness. This is where true transformation takes place. It is not in the act of becoming, but in the act of releasing. Because every time you let go of something that no longer belongs to you, you create space for something more aligned to enter. You allow yourself to move forward without being pulled back by what is no longer meant to stay. And this does not mean that you will never feel attachment again. It does not mean that you will never struggle with letting go. But each time you become aware of it, each time you choose to release instead of hold on, you strengthen your ability to live with more freedom, with more presence, and with more peace. You begin to trust the process of life. You begin to understand that not everything is meant to stay, and that endings are not something to fear, but something to accept. Because every ending creates the possibility for something new, something that is more aligned with who you are becoming. So, if you feel that something in your life is becoming heavy, if you feel that quiet sense that something is no longer right, do not ignore it. Listen to it. Sit with it, and when you are ready, allow yourself to release it, not with force, not with fear, but with understanding, because transformation does not begin when you add more to your life. It begins when you have the courage to let go, and in that quiet act of release, you will begin to feel something different, something lighter, something more real. You will begin to feel yourself returning to a place of clarity, of peace, and of truth. And that is where your transformation truly begins. Your new life begins when you start living as who you've become. There is a subtle shift that happens after you have let go, after you have faced your pain, after you have slowly begun to rebuild yourself from within. It is not loud, and it does not arrive with a clear announcement, but it is something you can feel. A quiet difference in the way you think, in the way you respond, and in the way you move through your life. At first, you may not fully trust it, because for so long, you have been used to your old patterns. You have been used to reacting in certain ways, to doubting yourself, to holding on, to seeking outside validation. And even after growth begins, there can still be moments where the old version of you tries to return, where familiar thoughts and habits quietly resurface. This is where many people misunderstand the process. They believe that once they have changed, they should never struggle again. They believe that rebuilding means becoming perfect, free from doubt, free from difficulty. But transformation does not remove your humanity. It deepens your awareness of it. The real shift is not that your old patterns disappear completely. The real shift is that you no longer follow them. You begin to notice them, but you do not become them. You begin to feel emotions, but you are not controlled by them. You begin to face situations, but you respond differently than you once did. And this is where your new life truly begins. Not in the moment you decide to change, but in the moments you choose to live differently. It is in the small decisions, the way you choose peace instead of reaction, the way you walk away instead of holding on, the way you stay silent instead of explaining yourself to be understood, the way you trust yourself instead of seeking approval. These moments may seem small, almost unimportant at first, but they are everything. Because this is how you embody your transformation. You are no longer just understanding these truths, you are living them. And slowly, something begins to stabilize within you. You are no longer constantly pulled back into your past. You are no longer defined by what you used to be. Instead, you begin to feel grounded in who you are becoming. There is a quiet confidence that grows, not from ego, but from alignment. You begin to trust your decisions, even when they are difficult. You begin to choose yourself, even when it feels unfamiliar. You begin to move through life with a sense of calm that does not need validation. And this is where rebuilding becomes real, because rebuilding is not just about what you let go of. It is about what you choose moving forward. It is about the standards you set for your life, the boundaries you create, and the energy you allow into your space. It is about no longer returning to what you have already outgrown, even when it tries to pull you back. There may still be moments of doubt, moments where you question yourself, where you feel the pull of old habits, where you wonder if it would be easier to go back to who you used to be. But in those moments, something within you is different. You pause, you observe, and you choose differently. And that choice, repeated over time, becomes your new identity. Not something forced, not something you pretend to be, but something that naturally forms through your actions, your awareness, and your consistency. You begin to realize that transformation is not a single moment. It is a way of living. It is the way you show up for yourself every day, in the quiet moments no one else sees. It is the way you honor your growth, not by speaking about it, but by embodying it. And as you continue on this path, something becomes clear. You are no longer trying to rebuild yourself. You already have. Now, you are simply living as the person you have become. And there is a deep sense of peace in that, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer in conflict with yourself. You are no longer trying to be someone else. You are simply being. And in that state, life begins to feel different, lighter, clearer, more honest, because you are no longer chasing transformation. You are living it. There comes a moment when everything you have been holding begins to fall silent, when the need to chase, to fix, to prove, slowly fades away, and you are left with something simple, something real. Not a new version of yourself, not a perfect version, but a more honest one. A version of you that no longer needs to hold on so tightly, no longer needs to become something else to feel enough. And in that quiet space, you begin to understand that this journey was never about changing who you are. It was about letting go of everything that made you forget. You let go of the weight you were never meant to carry. You released the stories that kept you small. You stopped searching for yourself in places where you were never meant to be found. And slowly, without force, without pressure, you began to return. Return to a place within you that feels calm, steady, and whole. Life will still move, things will still change, and there will still be moments that test you. But now, something is different. You are no longer lost within those moments. You are no longer defined by them. You have created space within yourself, and in that space, there is clarity, there is strength, and there is peace. So, if you are still in the middle of this journey, if you are still letting go, still rebuilding, still finding your way. Trust that you are not behind, you are not broken, you are exactly where you need to be. Because this is not the end of your transformation. This is you finally coming home to yourself. If this resonated with you, comment, "I'm ready to rebuild myself."